Now part of the Darkcast Network. Welcome to Indie Podcasts with a dark side. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you a horrible case where it took the bravery of a little boy protecting his sister to bring down a coward of a pedophile. We're talking the case of pedophile Anthony Stocks right now on Love and Murder. Welcome everyone, welcome new lambs, welcome old lambs to Love and Murder, your weekly true crime podcast telling you of relationships that turn to murder. I am your host Kai, and in today's episode, it's going to be a doozy of an episode. Warning, it does talk about child harm and child SA. So I just want to put that warning out there. Before we begin, I want to say this episode and all my episodes are sponsored by my lambs in Patreon, patreon.com/Love and Murder. If you want to be a supporter of Lamb and you won't get intros, so you'll get right into the heart of the episode. You won't have commercials and you'll have case extras plus bonuses and a community of lovely lambs in there. Then join us over at patreon.com/Love and Murder. But let's cut all the chit chat. So grab your butts, grab your BJ's apple juice, murderandlove.com/BJ's to get $30 off your first year subscription. And let's get into some Love and Murder. In 2022, in Brighton, UK, 54-year-old Anthony Stocks, who was already a convicted pedophile, threw an 11-year-old boy off of a 100-foot cliff so that he can continue to sexually assault the boy's 9-year-old sister. Surprisingly, the boy survived with severe injuries. So Anthony, by this time, like I said, he was already a convicted pedophile, so he had weekly meetings, or I don't want to say weekly because the reports didn't say weekly, it just said in general, he did have to meet with a mental health support worker. So I don't know the frequency of that, but he did have to meet with a mental health support worker. And he had told his mental health support worker that one day he was going to marry this girl, this 9-year-old girl. So Anthony, who had already been married twice, so I guess you couldn't make it work with grown women, so you had to snatch a little girl. Anyway, he was grooming her and she had said she was scared of him. So she went and told her brother after some time, because she didn't immediately tell her brother because, again, she was scared of Anthony. But after some time, she found her courage and she did go and tell her brother, who was 11 years old, so only 3 years older than her, but that's still her older brother. So she told him about the sexual assault that had been going on. She told him who was doing it. She told him that she was scared of this guy and everything like that. So the little boy, being a big brother, figured that he needed to protect his sister. So he started hanging around. Anytime Anthony was around his sister, he would be around to make sure that nothing happened. He would never let his sister out of his sight. So after a while of this, Anthony's getting frustrated. So he told the girl that he was going to hurt her brother. And the girl said, quote, "I felt worried. It was a few days before when Stocks told me he was going to hurt my brother. It was to get him to stop following us." So on September 24th, 2022, Anthony took the boy from London to a cliff in Brighton, which is about 54 miles away, where a witness said they saw, quote, "a small shape fall as if thrown from a cliff." And then they heard a scream. The witness had been there just chilling with their friends, was walking towards the cliff, and that's when he saw the boy and he saw this man heading towards the top of the cliff. The boy had his hands out as if he was balancing. He seemed to be having fun. The man was walking behind him and was matching his pace. So these people thought nothing of it. You just see, a man and a little boy on a cliff. You probably think it's the father and his son showing him the cliff or whatever. So, he's not really paying attention. The person and their friend just kept walking towards the cliff. Nobody's really thinking anything of it. And then as they got closer to the cliff, they saw a crowd of people. So this is the bottom of the cliff. They're not at the top of the cliff. And they saw a crowd of people. So they went to find out what the crowd was looking at. There's something beached up here, what's going on. And when the crowd parted, they saw that the crowd had been surrounding a boy. And the person said the boy was, quote, clearly in a bad state, but was alive. The boy's injuries included abrasions to his chest, several deep lacerations to his scalp, multiple fractures to his left arm, a deformity to his left shoulder, and more multiple bruises. So obviously somebody called 999, and when they arrived, they treated the boy right then and there. They then sedated him and airlifted him to St. George's Hospital in Tooting, London. While he was there, he had to be resuscitated and then placed in a medical coma. This is how badly injured he was, which I understand. It was 100-foot cliff. Or to all my other listeners who use the metric system, it was a 30.48 meter high cliff that he threw him off of. So I could understand his little body is really fighting to stay alive. Also, while he was at the hospital, after they resuscitated him and placed him in a medical coma, they found out that he had even more injuries than they originally thought. Now they're able to look internally, and internally he had lacerations to his spleen and he had lacerations to his kidney. Later, it was found out that because of the, quote, extremely high impact trauma, the boy didn't even have memory of the fall itself. He knew what happened before the fall, and then he knew he woke up here at the hospital, but the fall itself, he had no memory of it. Now, all this is going on with the little boy. While at the scene, Anthony was being interviewed by the police. He told police that he had asked the boy if he wanted to go to the seaside, and then he had decided to take him to the top of the cliff instead. He said while the boy stood at the edge of the cliff, he himself sat on a bench and smoked a cigarette. He said, I was just chilling, Then while he, quote, had his head down and suddenly the boy was gone. So he's like, I took my eye off of him for 1 second. Really? So he said, he just looked down, he looked up, the boy was gone. So he thought the boy was hiding and, quote, so he ran and found him at the bottom of the cliff. That doesn't even make sense. So you thought he was hiding. So you ran the 100 feet down the cliff to find him? As an adult, whether it's my child or not, if I think a child that I'm with is hiding, the first thing I'm not doing is running 100 feet down a cliff. I'm going to completely search the top part of the cliff, and then I'll go down. So that doesn't even make sense. So apparently police didn't believe what he said either. So he was arrested on suspicion of child neglect and causing or allowing the serious injury of a child. So basically, police originally thought this was like an accidental fall and this person just wasn't watching who he was supposed to be watching, the child that was in his care. So that's why they arrested him and charged him with that. However, there was not enough information to keep him, so he ended up being released. However, after more of an investigation was conducted, he was again arrested on May 12, 2023 on suspicion of sexual activity with a child under 13 and rape of a child under 13. So this time when police came to interrogate him, he came prepared with a lawyer who read out a prepared statement on his behalf saying, quote, I'm not sexually attracted to children and have not tried to have or instigated sexual activity with children, end quote. How did you know this is what they were coming to arrest you for, that you had this particular statement written out? Because it's not like they call you ahead of time to tell you, hey, we're on our way to you and we're charging you with sexual activity of a child under 13 and rape of a child under 13. It's not like you get a heads up. So how did you specifically have this statement prepared and a lawyer prepared to read this statement? Anyway, after the lawyer read this, Anthony then refused to cooperate with the police and answer any of their questions. And police released him. Then on November 23rd, 2023, he was rearrested again on suspicion of attempted murder. This time, the arrest stuck and he went to trial. At his trial, for the prosecution's opening statement, attorney Zoe Johnson told the jury, quote, the defendant forced a girl under 13 to have sexual contact with him, knowing it was wrong. The boy had started to try to intervene. Unbeknownst to the boy's mother, the defendant took him to Brighton and in particular to the cliffs. That afternoon, the boy fell 100 feet from the cliff edge onto the concrete sidewalk below. Well, they said underwalk. And continuing on with the quote, surprisingly, he did not die, but was very seriously injured and had to be airlifted to hospital in London. Initially, it was believed that what had happened to him was a dreadful accident, but investigators revealed a different and much darker picture. The defendant attempted to murder him by pushing him off the cliff. The defendant may have instantly regretted what he had done, but at the moment he pushed the victim, it was the climax of a plan to get the boy out of the way so he could no longer interfere. End quote. During his trial, the court heard all of this information as well as testimony from the children. It was also revealed that the abuse happened in East Oxfordshire between 2019 and 2022. After Anthony had found out that the little girl had told her brother and that her brother had decided to put an end to it, Anthony decided that he'll put an end to her brother. First, he decided that he was going to take the boy to a quarry, but then he changed his mind. Later on is when he decided to take the boy to see the Chelsea Football Club and then go to the cliff and push him off. So this kind of sounds like premeditation to me. The prosecution went ahead and described Anthony to the court as manipulative and selfish. And although Anthony pled what lambs? What did he plead? Say it with me now. Not guilty. There are literally witnesses, and he still formed his mouth to say not guilty. Anyway, although he pled not guilty, the court unanimously found him guilty of attempted murder, rape, sexual assault of a child under 13, and causing or inciting a child under 13 to engage in sexual activity. Anthony was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 19 and a half years. Detective Sergeant Rachel Jackson of Thames Valley Police's Child Abuse Investigation Unit said, quote, I am pleased that today Stocks had been handed a very significant sentence for his horrific and evil offenses against two young children. Stocks is an extremely dangerous individual who had no thought about anybody but himself to protect himself from prosecution by removing the boy from the equation. He has never shown any remorse throughout the course of this investigation. I would like to praise both victims for their unbelievable courage and resolve that helped us to bring Stocks to justice. They showed immense maturity and clarity both in their interviews with police and at court about what had happened to them. It's because of this truly inspirational courage that Stocks has now been brought to justice and will now be in prison for a long time where he deserves to be. In my years investigating child abuse, this is one of the worst cases I have dealt with, and the impact that this has had on both victims as well as all of the officers and staff who investigated this is not to be underestimated. End quote. After the sentencing, the children's mother said, quote, my children have been through unimaginable horror. I am grateful to the police and the judicial system for bringing him to justice. And that is a horrible, sickening case of pedophile Anthony Stocks. What lambs do you think about this case? Now, I know usually on Mondays, as you can see, we've changed it to Mondays, the Sunday episode to Mondays, because it seems like a lot of people more listen on Mondays than they do Sunday evenings. So I digress. Usually on the full episodes, it is a bit longer. It's usually like 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But this one, although short, I thought it was very important to bring it to your attention because this guy is a sicko. He thought he was going to marry this little girl that he kept, and the little girl clearly, like, when I tell you I saw a video today of somebody trying to explain away pedophilia, oh, some of these people are like, I'm not going to leave because you're talking to the parents. You're keeping me from my love. She wants to be with me. When I say I've seen some videos in the past, like couple months about pedophiles and the stuff that comes out of their mouth, I can't even. I just thought this was a very important case to shed light on because number one of the bravery of the brother is an 11-year-old boy who just knew he was going to stand up to a grown man to protect his sister. Unimaginable bravery. And the little girl who, no matter what happened to her, she decided that she was going to stand up in court and look this guy in the eye and basically say, I am no longer afraid of you. So, like I said, even though this was a shorter case, I did want to bring your attention to it, and I thought it was very important to do this case. So I want to hear from you. What did you think about this case? And in the poll question I'm going to put out, I'm going to ask you, do you think pedophile Anthony should have gotten the death penalty, or do you think he should spend the rest of his life in prison with people who don't like pedophiles? Which one do you think should happen? So that is the poll question that I'm going to put out. The only thing I don't like, I know because it's England, they said with a minimum sentence of 19 years. So they might have him out in 19 years. 19 and a half. Yeah, they might have him out in 19 and a half years, which, I mean, what would he be? Almost 64 years old? So he'll still have some life left in him. So I wish it was he just got life in prison, period. Without that minimum term, he doesn't deserve to even have the opportunity to be let out early. But that's just my opinion. So go ahead and answer that poll question. And don't forget, if you like this episode, go ahead and subscribe. And then let's go ahead and share this episode with everyone we know and everyone we don't. So go ahead and share this episode with your parents. Let them hear this episode and let's hear their thoughts on what they thought about the details of this case. So that's someone you know, and let's go with everyone you don't. So go ahead and share this episode on a true crime Reddit group if you're part of a true crime Reddit group. And as I leave you at the end of all my full episodes, let's say it all together now. It's all love and no murder, y'all. See you in the next episode. Bye.